as far as like jumping into single family versus multifamily, another thing that really did for me was get me the experience that I needed to continue growing into those larger multifamily assets. As we know, if you want to get agency debt, which is, borrowing directly from Fannie and Freddie, typically they're going to have the best terms for loans, et cetera, but they also want a borrower that has some experience, usually that's already done an agency loan before. And so by getting into this deal, they want somebody that's already done multifamily before. And so by getting into this deal as early as I could in my career process, it kind of set me up for the deals right after that to be able to get a hold of better debt, because now I have experience. They know that I've gone full cycle on a 32 unit, things like that.
I know people on the extreme side who say, well, this is a 1954 building. It's 42% occupied, and I've done this on a building in Augusta, right? We just vacated everything. Said, all right, we're going to vacate everything, and we're going to go building by building and blitz it and lease back up. But I was prepared for no cash flow. I was like, I have to burn expenses for a while to do this, and you just got to plan for it. And so, like, I love that you went there with it. But think about the alternative, folks. A lot of people come on this show, or they come at me like, hey man, how do I take down that big sexy 250 unit deal? Like, you shouldn't. Yeah, you really. I agree with the go as big as you're comfortable mindset, but I do not agree with someone who is green without an experienced operator.
You're listening to the Real Estate Runway podcast, powered by Quattro Capital, where we are all about alternative business and investment strategies to help you amplify life and maximize wealth. Here's your host, the recovering engineer turned multifamily investor, Chad Sutton.
All right. Real Estate Runway family, welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Runway podcast. We are back in action after our month-long break, so good to see you all. As a reminder, we are here for you at Real Estate Runway. If you have any questions, if you have things you want to hear on the show, drop it in the comments. Hit us at podcast@thequattroway.com, and we'd be happy to bring someone on or have a topic and feature that. And remember, if you get any value out of this show or anything we do, just interact with it wherever you listen to it. Swipe on TikTok, give us a 5-star review on podcast, make some comments in LinkedIn, like us, subscribe. Wherever you are, just interact with it. Share the show with someone who you think will benefit from the value we're about to give you today, and just pay it forward, folks. All right. Without further ado, let's get into the show today. We have Mr. Sean DiMartile. Sean, this one's been a long time coming. Welcome to the show, brother. How you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come on your show, brother.
Absolutely. And as we do, I want to hear about you first, man. So tell the audience a little bit about you, your background, why you got into what you're doing, and let's start from there, and then we'll see where this goes.
Yeah, let's do it. So starting from the top, I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. Came out to San Diego, California, where I'm at now, in about 2011 because I joined the Navy. Served in the Navy for 5 years as an air traffic controller. Got out of the Navy and got hired here in San Diego again, but this time by the FAA as an air traffic controller. So I worked doing for them for about 6 years. And, while I was working, this was my dream job, by the way, was to work as an air traffic controller for the FAA. It's a great job. It pays well and all that. But it has crappy hours, shift work. And after I started really like kind of locking into the grind, I was like realizing like, man, I don't know if I want to just keep doing this of working 6-day work weeks, go home, have a little bit of time to get all my chores and errands done, and then go and repeat that. And long story short, I had a buddy that was in real estate as an agent and had told me this is probably 5 or 6 years ago. He told me about the Bigger Pockets podcast. And I listened to that while I was on a road trip, and I was just hooked because I kept hearing all of these stories of everyday people like PE teachers and single mothers and, et cetera, that had built small real estate portfolios and were able to quit their jobs and support their family. And that just rung a bell. And really from there, it was just a matter of me going down the rabbit hole with every single book I heard mentioned on a podcast. I'd buy it, I'd read it, I'd study, and then it just became something that I was really passionate about. And as time went on, I was looking for deals. I ended up partnering with some people to get my very first deal, which was a 32 unit multifamily. So like I didn't even start with the small stuff. I liquidated my 401k in order to JV on that deal, and just really dove all in. Flash forward a couple years, I've got a really good mentor since then. Started syndicating properties with my mentor, and now today I'm at about 300, a little over 300 units, multifamily units. And I've got, a couple Airbnbs. I bought and sold a boutique hotel and kind of bounced around a little bit. So I guess that's the 30,000 foot view of my story and where I'm at today. I'm also a podcast host myself, and I've kind of branched out into eat, sleep, and breathe real estate. And I did quit that W-2 job last year.
Yeah, folks, and so congratulations on that. And folks, if you stick around till the end, we're going to ask Shawn to give us a little plug on what podcast that is that he's running, so you can get some more value from Shawn on his airwaves as well. So I highly encourage that. Hang out till the end. So Shawn, let's get into unpacking some of that, right? So one thing that resonated with me was something I do as well, right? You read every book, every podcast. What do you think like in your eyes, what's the benefit of not just picking up one, but reading all of them, and trying to distill the themes there? What would you learn from that?
I think that the benefit of just doing that kind of process and just reading, getting everything you can get your hands on, is that you get something unique really out of every single one of those books. So even if there's like 2 books on multifamily, I feel like I've been able to extract something unique from every single book that I've read that I can pile on to like my knowledge base. And I really think that the podcasts too, I think those were just as big as the books, because with podcasting, you're hearing stories and people's experiences. And all the time you're going to hear about, well, I ran into this issue, so I fixed that issue doing this, or here's how I resolved this thing. And then sure enough, sometimes that exact same situation will happen to you, and in the back of your mind, in your toolbox, you'll remember that. And then, have the solution to the problem, or you can even avoid the problem altogether by hearing somebody else's story. So I like both of those methods, just because they're also either cheap or free. Podcasts are free, books are cheap. But I learned just so much information by doing that and giving myself a good base to jump in. Granted, as we know, eventually you just have to jump in, because you could read all day all you want and listen to podcasts all you want, and you just won't learn everything. But
yeah, I totally agree with that. And the cool thing about podcasts, we live in such a great time, folks, where whether it's podcasts or YouTube, it's all the same to me, right? But that is current information. Like, this podcast is being recorded on December 8th, and I bet you my bottom dollar you're going to hear it before Christmas. And I still don't know how to use these Apple emojis, so sorry for the thumbs up if you're on YouTube. And, so it's very current. Whereas a book, which is also great and has like timeless information in a lot of cases, because it's usually what's been distilled over a career, for example, you get a different mode of learning. You get something that may be more timeless. The book may have been written 10 years ago, so no, every strategy that they use may not work today. There may be something that's changed, but the timeless information, think about overarching things like how to not use too much leverage in real estate, how to buy for cash flow, how to buy quality real estate. That doesn't change over time that much. So I love that you echoed, me on that one, Shawn. And let's get into some stuff here. So another thing that resonated with me was you say I didn't start with the small stuff, and you were talking about single family, but you did start with a small multifamily. And since then, I'm sure you've done much larger deals. Talk about, your experience starting with a 32 unit building, and to contrast that, what might you have done differently or learned differently had you done real or single family first, or a 300 unit building first? I'm just curious how the 32 fit as a good starting place,
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that 32, a lot of the good things it did for me was it allowed me to get my feet wet, probably at a more forgiving time of the market, I could say. It was a time where if you made a couple mistakes, because, cap rates kept declining, you were forgiven for it a little bit more on the exit. So like my timing of that kind of worked out, but everything else, like in regards to that 32 unit, I think was a really good way for me to get my feet wet into the commercial size assets. A couple of things, like, for example, that I learned by doing that was sort of the, what's the right way to put it? how to maneuver your vacancy, your upcoming lease expirations, et cetera. So like when I went into this 32 unit, all I wanted to do was renovate all the units as fast as humanly possible. And that way I can increase the value as quickly as possible, right? That's what I was all about, like adding value. So this property was in a really great neighborhood, but it was 1967 or 68 vintage and hadn't really been fixed up in a long time. And when I took over, 4 of the units were down units that needed to be fixed up before they could even be rented. And then as time went on, and I was renovating those units, within a couple of weeks, a couple more leases were coming due. And I had the decision of, okay, I could just try and renew them, or I can go ahead and just not renew them so I can go in and make my renovations. And one of the things that happened was so many units ended up simultaneously leaving and going vacant. And then I think one other person just stopped paying rent and then ditched. Was that I ended up with a really high vacancy number. And so I was cash flow in the red. And that wasn't something that I necessarily planned for. So I made big mistakes in that sense. And it kind of taught me the importance of managing my occupancy a lot better to ensure that I'm cash flowing, to ensure that the property is healthy, instead of just all of a sudden dropping it down to 70% occupancy just because I want to flip all the units. But as far as like jumping into single family versus multifamily, another thing that really did for me was get me the experience that I needed to continue growing into those larger multifamily assets. As we know, if you want to get agency debt, which is, borrowing directly from Fannie and Freddie, typically they're going to have the best terms for loans, et cetera, but they also want a borrower that has some experience, usually that's already done an agency loan before. And so by getting into this deal, they want somebody that's already done multifamily before. And so by getting into this deal as early as I could in my career process, it kind of set me up for the deals right after that to be able to get a hold of better debt, because now I have experience. They know that I've gone full cycle on a 32 unit, things like that. But I mean, I wouldn't recommend jumping into a 32 unit for just everybody out there, because it is a big risk. I will say that I made a lot of other mistakes as well. That I've since been able to learn from those mistakes and apply to future deals. But it was a big risk. Like a couple of the things that went wrong, for example, was I didn't do as good of an inspection when I went into this 32 unit. So a lot of things ended up coming up that I did not have the capital set aside for. And so I had to pull capital from other parts of the business plan. So for example, the first summer of owning that 32 unit, we just had air conditioners dropping like flies. Like they were just like unusable. They broke to the point of no return, and I would have to replace them for $4,500. And on top of that, there were some drainage pipes that were made out of clay that had collapsed. We had some cast iron piping that was really corroded, and not a lot of water was getting through it. And if I had just done a more thorough inspection on the beginning by paying the inspector to scope every single sewer line, I probably could have avoided a lot of those issues, or at least been prepared for them and raised the capital for it, or found a partner to bring in some more capital. So, there's a laundry list of a lot of things I learned throughout that process from front to back, but we still ended up making really well. I mean, we tripled our initial investment in just a little over 2 years. So everything worked out great according to plan. But I definitely learned the ropes on that 32 unit for my first deal.
I love when I give someone a softball and they just slam it over the fence. That's exactly where I was hoping you would go with it. So thank you for that.
Sweet.
Like some of the stuff that you said there, guys. I've mentioned this on the show before. My first multifamily deal, back when, was a 35 unit deal, and I did a couple of 20s and a couple of 10s, and I didn't really graduate, if you will, to above 100 until, I don't know, I probably had 200 units under my belt. And it was a great experience, because just like what Shawn is saying, these buildings, when you have single family assets separate, right? They're all a little bit different, but they're not connected, right, in any way.
Mhm.
In a multifamily asset, think about this, and he really hit this on the head with the physics of occupancy, right? There really are
Mhm.
physics of how these things operate. If you do this, this will happen, cause and effect. And so he said, well, I wanted to push rents. I wanted to get the work done and get the income up as high as possible. Well, guess what? You can only go so fast in construction unless you're big and have muscle to go do 200 units at one time, which most don't starting out. And so you probably
Mhm.
have Bubba and local guys who can do 1 or 2 units at a time. Well, if you just vacated 16 units, that's going to take you a few months to get that done and catch up and leased and inspected, and things aren't
Yep.
going to go perfect and all that kind of stuff. And so what he's saying is he experienced a lot lower cash flow than he thought he was going to have, because he probably didn't connect in his mind at the time that, gee, if I go fast, they're going to be down for longer and I'm going to lose that cash flow. And so you can do that. The physics are there. If you just, like, I know people on the extreme side who say, well, this is a 1954 building. It's 42% occupied, and I've done this on a building in Augusta, right? We just vacated everything. Said, all right, we're going to vacate everything, and we're going to go building by building and blitz it and lease back up. But I was prepared for no cash flow. I was like, I have to burn expenses for a while to do this, and you just got to plan for it. And so, like, I love that you went there with it, but think about the alternative, folks. A lot of people come on this show, or they come at me like, hey man, how do I take down that big sexy 250 unit deal? Like, you shouldn't. Yeah, you really. I agree with the go bigger, go as big as you're comfortable mindset, but I do not agree with someone who is green without an experienced operator taking down multiple hundred units, because that same problem that he experienced there, he would have found himself with about 80 or 100 units vacant and down for months. Yep. And that's these are just bigger beasts. The physics are the same, but it takes more capital, more time, more effort to correct a problem. So, man, fantastic way to hit that ball of the park, dude.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So let's pivot a little bit and let's go to, you're operating primarily in San Diego, right? And I'm gonna address the elephant in the room, right? So a lot of people are, who talk about real estate say stay as far away from California as possible. I'm just gonna stop talking and say go.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did, because that's the elephant in the room that I always like to address. Well, first of all, most of my assets are not in San Diego as of right now. So 295 units are in North Carolina.
Okay.
But as of recently, meaning like within the past year, my partner and I pivoted to San Diego. So let's address that elephant in the room. People often say, people on Bigger Pockets, Brandon Turner will say, I don't invest in California for X, Y, and Z. And for most of my career, I agreed for the same reasons. They do have landlord-tenant laws that are skewed way in the tenant's favor. Real estate is extremely expensive out here. In order to cash flow on properties, you have to put a lot more money down. So there's a larger barrier to entry. Like if you wanted to get a 250 unit in San Diego, I mean, you're talking $100 million for depending on where it's at. So, depending on the assets you're trying to target, it's not an easy market to get things done. The landlord tenant laws are such that it's a lot harder if you're going to do a value add plan to say, hey, I don't want to renew your guys' leases. I'm sorry, but we're doing a major renovation to the property. So that, we're going to renovate your units, et cetera. We're not renewing. You can't really do that here in most cities in Southern California, because tenants have tenant rights. They have the right to that spot for basically as long as you're following the rent laws and you don't have cause to not renew or evict them. Usually that means if they've broken any rules, broken their lease, or you need to evict them, that would be like due cause to get them out of there. But if they're paying their rent on time and you're only raising rent, 5% or whatever, they can stay there if they want. So it makes underwriting a value add multifamily property really difficult to be accurate, because, if you're saying, okay, I think I'm estimating that we're going to renovate, this percentage of the units every single month, and will be completed in 2 years with the renovations. Well, that's out the window in California, because I have no idea when I'm going to be able to get these tenants out if they don't want to leave. Now, on the one hand, I think some people bash that a little too extreme, because it's not that common, depending on your asset class, for tenants to be like that, right? People hear about cash for keys in California, people giving $20,000 for the tenant to move out just so they can get in there and do their value add plan. That is not as common as people make it seem when you hear people on podcasts, et cetera. And in addition to that, the landlord tenant laws do not apply if your property was built after, I think, 2015. So if it's a new construction build, you can raise rents as much as you want. Now, I say all of that because those are all of the reasons that I've never been interested in value add multifamily in San Diego. And I didn't become interested in San Diego until 2 years ago. They released their bonus ADU program. So I'm going to try and do this as quickly as possible because I know we don't have a ton of time. But essentially,
if we're giving value, we're going to do it. So keep going, Sean.
Let's go. So a lot of your listeners, I'm sure, have heard of accessory dwelling units, otherwise known as ADUs. It's kind of a hot topic that California, I believe, pioneered, right? You're starting to hear this across the country a little bit more. You might have heard them as called as granny flats or whatever. But essentially, you can have a house and you can put like 1, maybe 2 apartment units in the back and kind of transform this into a duplex or triplex and have that as a rental, which adds a ton of value to your house. Well, San Diego has a unique problem, different from the rest of California. San Diego is geographically constrained by the ocean to the west, Mexico to the south, mountainous terrain to the east, and Camp Pendleton military base to the north. All of the buildable land has been taken in San Diego. San Diego has the least amount of buildable land in the country, next to, I think, Miami. And because of that, they had to come up with a new solution. So what they did is they decided they have to increase density, obviously. And to do that, they created a new model based off of the ADU model, which allows you to build an unlimited number of ADUs on a lot that is in what's called the transit priority area. So basically, if it's within a half a mile of major public transportation, and if it's a multifamily zoned lot, you can do this to single family, but usually you can only add like 2 or 3. So if it's a multifamily zone lot, if I'm in the transit priority area, and I can build an unlimited number of these ADUs up to the floor area ratio. So I won't get into all the like confusing stuff, but what this means is that I can buy a multifamily zone lot that's got a single family house on it, and I can put a 30-unit apartment complex on there.
Wow.
Or I can put a 10-unit apartment complex. So a perfect example, there was one of my projects is a single family home that was on a multifamily zone lot on a hill overlooking the ocean a half a mile from the beach in Ocean Beach. Now, this property is going to be a 10-unit apartment complex when I'm finished. Now, a lot of people might be thinking, okay, that's pretty small. It's not huge. They're right. You're not going to be building 250-unit apartment complexes. You're going to be typically anywhere from 10 to, I've seen 30, 40, 50 units. And there has been a 100, the record so far in San Diego is a 146 unit. And these are all ADUs. Now, people are hearing this and thinking, okay, what happens after you build all these ADUs? They are ADUs or accessory dwelling units only in name. It's only referring to the part of the municipal code that allows you to build these units. Outside of that, they look, act, and sell just like apartment units. So, in other words, this Ocean Beach project that I have, where I have a house and I'm making it a 10-unit apartment right by the beach, that is going to be sold and traded just like an apartment complex. Somebody can't come in with an FHA loan and buy that and own it. So a couple of things that I really love about this plan before we can maybe unpack a little bit more, because I've already gone for a long time here, is number one, I'm not going to be inheriting tenants that it's difficult for me to project what my turnover rate's going to be. 2, I'm buying an asset that I can either Airbnb, midterm rental, or long-term rental, so that I can eliminate one of the big risks of development, which is holding costs, right? Because I buy this house, or let's assume I buy a vacant plot of land to do traditional development. I'm sitting there paying that debt, and I'm paying taxes while I'm making no money. With this form of development, I have an asset that I actually can bring in cash from to reduce or eliminate those holding costs. So I love that about it. And number 3, I'm putting new product on the line in some of the most coveted neighborhoods here, where otherwise there aren't any being built. So for example, that Ocean Beach project, there have been 0 new deliveries in the past, I think 3 or 4 years. So I get a lot of advantages in that way. I don't, there's a whole list of things that I don't have to do that traditional developers do have to do. I've got faster permitting timelines. The list goes on. But I'm able to build these for about $200,000 per unit. And these multifamily units that are A-class in San Diego will sell for north of $400,000 per unit. So I have a good delta. I've got reduced holding costs. I can place great tenants at market rate rents without having to worry about the minutia of turning these units. And I'm in a market of San Diego where a lot of people want to live here. It's not like San Francisco where tons of people are moving out. On average, we have 17 renters competing for the same apartment here in San Diego. So there's a ton of demand. San Diego is now the highest demand market in the state of California for renters. So, you know, I'll kind of stop there because I can sometimes digress too much. But that's why we're focusing on San Diego. It's a new strategy, and it just makes sense for us. We're taking what the defense has given us. So they're smaller projects, but they still have a big pop. For those listening that are hearing, okay, 10, 20, 30 units, I mean, a 20-something unit in San Diego can go for north of $20 million. So you're still talking big zeros, but a little different.
Yeah, and man, unpack some of that here. So this is kind of like the super value add concept that you've heard me talk about, except it's hyper local, right? And to remind you, that's where you acquire, you know, call it a 30 or 40 unit value add that was built at the time on large acreage, and you can go build maybe 30 or 40 more. So your super value add is you fix what's there, and you know, build new, and now you've got a great basis on you know, half new build. So what's cool about this, and I think I heard you say, if it's built after 2015, some of the landlord-tenant laws don't really apply. Is that right?
That is true. Now, with this model, though, there is a catch. Okay. So basically, after you've built a certain number of these ADUs, there's some calculations for how many you get by right at market rates. Okay. Once you hit your limit on that, and you're doing the bonus program, essentially for every market rent unit you build, you have to match it or put another unit there that is deed restricted or rent restricted for 15 years. Yeah. And they base it off of the area median income, which essentially can mean a couple $100 difference in some neighborhoods. In some neighborhoods, it's the same as market rent. But so depending on the project, that might make it not make sense. But most of our projects that we're using the program, it does.
Yeah. Well, and that's fantastic because, again, you know, you're building new asset basically, right? And so your OpEx is going to be lower. You can, and you're able to kind of solve a need. This is just a lesson, folks, that when you do what the government needs you to do, you are compensated, right? And in this case, it's the ability to build things where others can't, you know, and maybe, I don't know if there's tax breaks and things that go with it as well, but they're incentivizing Shawn to solve a problem. And so I know we hear value add real estate and we think, okay, let's go get the highest rent possible, maximize. But, you know, what I think we all know has been created is a void. We've pushed rents a lot in the last, 5 years. And so if you figure out how to be different and how to help solve the affordable housing problem, or just in Shawn's case, the housing problem, there isn't housing period, right? Then you're going to be warmly compensated for it. And so, think about how to do that. And it, again, it bigger is not always better, right? It sounds like the dollars are definitely there. And, but Shawn gets to sleep at night. He's able to solve a problem, do good by people, and make money while he's doing it because he's doing what San Diego needs. And so you kind of just blew up the whole thing about not wanting to invest in California because real estate is hyper local, folks. You can't even talk at the state level. You can talk generally, but I can tell you that, I've stopped investing in Texas as a whole right now, but there are still little submarkets I would go to because they have a need and the economics are right. So like Shawn knows the hyper neighborhood to be in, right?
I wanted to piggyback a little bit because I just wanted to say that for those that, if anybody ever tells you you can't make money in X market, don't listen to that person because it's just not true. Like somebody might say, oh, you can't make money in real estate in New York City. Well, all of these guys building and developing and owning these properties aren't idiots.
Right.
Okay. They, it might be difficult. The strategy might be completely different. if it wasn't for this program that the government gave, I probably wouldn't be investing in San Diego. There are ways to make money and make great returns. It just might be a different strategy, or you might have to combine several strategies, for one. And two, like, I wanted to say that, like, with this business model I'm working on, for example, it has some downsides. Like, number one, I have to build the apartment, and that's going to take me 2 to 3 years. So there's not really any cash flow for 2 to 3 years. Now, we're going to make a bunch of money once this thing's built or once we exit. But if you're one of those investors that's focused only on cash return, then this business model might not be for you. But if you're just more concerned with the long road and you're willing to wait 5 years, you can do really, really well. You can make above 20% annualized returns, 20% IRRs. You can do that, but it's going to be a lot different than the other strategies you're used to hearing about with like value add multifamily. So
I love it, Shawn. Thank you for bringing that insight and really kind of blowing up the notion that, like, I love what you said. If anyone ever tells you can't make money somewhere, ask yourself, is every person who owns real estate in that market losing money or doing it for free? Right? I guarantee you, even in Detroit, Michigan, in the worst throes of that economy, right, people were making money in real estate. And there's something to be said. I mean, if everyone's running this way and you run that way, you're probably going to have more opportunities to find than others would. So I'll leave it there, Shawn, and let's take it to the Quattro questions real quick, learn a little bit more about you as a person. Sound good?
Let's do it.
All right. First one, Shawn, what is your superpower? Could be life or business, and how does it serve you?
I think my superpower is man, it's data and data geekness. I like to geek out on data. I like to just dig and memorize data with flashcards and things like that, so that I know it off the top of my head. I don't know if that's a superpower, but just the power of digging super deep is like what I like to call it. It's what I love to do. It's what I like to do with my underwriting and my pitch decks. So I'm a data geek guy.
It drives informed decisions, right? I love that. And let's take that to the other side of the coin, Shawn. What is your biggest mistake? And it could be life or business. And what did you learn from it, most importantly?
I would say my biggest mistake was, I'll say just business wise, one of my biggest mistakes was not jumping into allowing things to get in the way that ended up becoming the way. And meaning, like, I was unwilling to get onto the social media. I didn't really want to go crazy advertising the podcast. I didn't really want to jump on all kinds of other people's podcasts and fill up my schedule. And I didn't want to put all the time and effort into writing blogs and articles and stuff like that. I just wanted to focus on the real estate stuff. But once I realized I needed to cast a wider net to continue growing my company, and bringing in more investors, and I actually got outside help with a business coach, and I changed that perspective and was willing to do everything, my business started to grow. So in other words, I was too worried about getting outside of my comfort zone and only focusing on what I wanted to do. And sometimes I think, especially if you're a young, an entrepreneur in your infancy stage, you can't have that stance. Just do everything. Cast a wide net. You never know, like as Marcus Aurelius said in his meditations, sometimes what is in the way becomes the way. So that ended up becoming the way that I grew my business.
Yeah, so true, man. And it's like, I think all of us who get into business, we think we're pretty smart, right? And we think we know a lot, and we're just going to go do it. And then you start to realize, wow, there's so much knowledge and experience out there that if I'm not out there talking about what I'm doing, I'm never going to find those people. Like, take this podcast, for example. If I was not spending my time to do episodes with people I've never met before, I would have never known that there's an investment strategy in San Diego where I can make money using an ADU, right? That concept, right? Mm-hmm. People think about and solve problems differently, and I'm a pretty smart guy, right? I'll claim that, but I do not know it all. And so if you're not out there, you're not going to find that, And yeah, dude. So love opening up on that one. And so let's take it to question number 3. This is where we're going to give that plug we talk about. So I love to talk about free gifts, podcasts, stuff like that. So whatever you're doing that is value add to the audience, please lay it out right here and where we can find it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that opportunity. If you want to learn more about that ADU strategy, as far as how do you calculate how many units you could put on it? How does this program work? What are the rules? What are the laws? How much money can you make? How do you put the deals together? All that stuff. I wrote a book that's an ebook that's 100% free. You can get that from my website, investorshawn.com. Shawn, I spell Shawn SHAWN. So just go to investorshawn.com. That's a great way to just, if you want to get in touch with me, you can click around and find my social media, email, things like that. And again, scroll to the bottom of the page. You could download that ebook. I call it California Gold because I call this the California Gold Rush. I think it's only going to be around for so long. There's only so many lots that are big enough and make sense to do it on. And I think over the next 5 years, most of those are going to get built on. So I call it the California Gold Rush. You can go read that for free. No strings attached.
I love that. I love that. And folks, that link will be, well, you didn't give us a link. You said, look for your name. But if you have a link, I'll get it from Shawn and we'll put it in the show notes. So scroll down wherever you are and you can click it right there. So last question, Shawn. Before I go there, do you have a link directly to that or should I just get it?
Yeah, I got a link directly to the book that I'll give you guys. And I did forget to plug the podcast, but that's also on that website, investorshawn.com. So you can follow along with that stuff. But I've got a link. We can put that in the show notes. So that all you guys got to do is click and you get it sent to you.
If you guys are on YouTube, you're probably laughing at me so hard right now because the link is right over Shawn's head, www.investorshawn.com, SHAWN. And that will be in the show notes for your clicking pleasure. Thank you to my editor for making sure that happens. Love you, Kyle. Good job. Okay, so last question. And this goes to really the core of the Quattro heartbeat here at Quattro Capital, who sponsors this show, Real Estate Runway. You know, we operate by 4 pillars. It is first, people coming together around a property that generates a profit, some of which is used for philanthropy, coming back and taking care of people. So, Shawn, I'd love to give you the opportunity. I give everyone the opportunity on the show to share your heart of, you know, how do you give back and do good in the world? You know, whether it's time, giving of your time, giving of your talents, giving of your treasures. How do you do that? And how might the audience, do that with you?
So one of the things that I spent a lot of time doing was Big Brothers and Sisters program. I think most cities have that. I spent about 6 years with my little brother. And essentially it's a program where you, kids that don't have good role models or maybe, trouble with their family, that need somebody to get them out of there and spend time with them. You can essentially sign up to be a big brother or sister, and get one of these, get a child, assigned to you. And then it's just simply taking them out, maybe to the movies, out to dinner, showing them what you do, being a friend to them and somebody that they can look up to and open up to. I think it's an amazing program that you can find in most major cities. And if you are in a business where you could be a good role model for somebody, I think, all it does is really require a little bit of your time. So that's one of the ways I've always loved to give back. I've always supported that program a ton. And I recommend if you're listening to this and you want a way to give back, I'm sure that there's a ton of kids out there that would love to hang out with a real estate investor and learn how they can do the same.
I love that, Shawn. I'm going to let that be the mic drop moment for the episode. Big brothers and big sisters, everybody. And folks, speaking of giving back, if you got any value out of this show whatsoever, pay it forward. We do this for your benefit. We do this for the benefit of others. The only way that someone else like you will hear this episode is if you like, subscribe, share, just do something to interact with the show and show the platform that you liked it. So thank you for joining us today on the Real Estate Runway podcast. Shawn, thanks for being here, brother. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
All right. This has been another episode of the Real Estate Runway podcast. Until next time, over and out.
We hope this episode was insightful and brought value to your day. If so, please be awesome and leave us a 5-star review. Find out how Team Quattro can help you at thequattroway.com. Until next time, this is the Real Estate Runway podcast.